Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. I know we have listeners from all across the world, but I saw this local story the other day, and it just absolutely blew my mind. The average salary for a full-time teacher in Vancouver Public School District is between $80,000 and $95,000 a year. But that's not all. If you have worked for 10 years or more, you step up to $110K a year. But that's not all. That is just the salary. For a full-time Vancouver public school teacher earning the $110,000 in salary every year, the district's total compensation cost is roughly $140,000 to $145,000 per year once you add the benefits and payroll taxes. So let's break that down for a second, okay? The salary is $110,000. Health benefits, as the employer share, is $16,000. Pension, employer share, $8,500. FICA, the employer share, $8,400. That's a total employer cost of $142,000 per year. That's a lot of money per teacher. And the latest data reports show total expenditures of about $470.1 million, or, get this, over $21,000 per student is what the Vancouver School District spends per student per year. Over $21,000. To be exact, $21,468. So what do taxpayers get for all that money? Well, more data reports show that around 44% of the Vancouver students are at or above proficiency in reading and 31% in math. Wow, 44% in reading and 31% in math. Now, with all of that in mind, because, I mean, if you at your job had those kind of numbers where you only were successful in what you were asked to do 30% of the time, do you think you'd be employed very long? Or do you think you should demand more money in order to work better? This is what blew my mind. This is what I saw on the local news. And this was from the Columbian in this area here. Like many of you know, this podcast originates in southwest Washington, state of Washington. It's a very blue, very liberal area. Right borders, of course, the very blue, very liberal Oregon border with Portland and all that. This is what the Columbian said. It says, teachers, staff, parents, and students rallied Thursday morning outside Vancouver schools to protest district layoffs. At Walnut Grove Elementary, a crowd gathered at 7 a.m. Many wore pink and held pink slips, a nod to their layoff notices. Get this, walk-ins also, this is what they called it, walk-ins also took place before class at 3 other schools. Quote, we are holding this walk-in today to show solidarity with our colleagues and students who have been impacted by recent RIF, or reduction in force notices. Kelly Goodman, a Walnut Grove 4th grade teacher and Vancouver Education Association representative. So this is a union representative, is what she told the crowd. She said, this is a peaceful and visible way for us to come together and show support for one another and for the future of our schools, unquote. You see, the district sent layoff or non-renewal notices to 289 educators, including all educators with 8 or fewer years of experience, according to the email. So they're getting rid. They're not even getting rid of the highest paid teachers. The district said the layoffs are based on seniority and in accordance with the union contracts. Quote, not all notices mean a loss of employment. Many of these people will be recalled into positions for which they are qualified, is what the email stated. And it also said, we must assure that teachers with more seniority are placed before teachers with less seniority. You see, this is another reason that unions are terrible, particularly public sector unions. I don't understand why public sector unions are even legal. They have to lay off teachers here based solely on how long they have been a teacher, not who is the better at teaching kids. The layoffs come as Vancouver public schools are at a growing risk of being unable to meet its financial obligations, according to a new state audit. So what they're saying is that this means they are almost insolvent. This public school district is almost insolvent. They literally only have about 4 days worth of money left. The school board last month approved staff cuts for the 26-27 school year, a step toward bringing the district's $24 million budget deficit under control. Most of the positions to be cut, 43.9 full-time equivalents, are building-based teachers on special assignments like coaches, specialists, mentors, things like that. And about 22% of the building level administrators and 15% of the district level administrators have received reduction notices. The district currently employs about 2,900 people. More than 85% of the district's budget is staffing. This according to the district's budget website. So this district is not the only one having to make budget cuts. Most of the districts in the state of Washington are experiencing the same thing. And yet, these teachers, this is what blew my mind, these teachers have decided that having a walk-in is a good idea. They don't understand. They literally don't understand the financial situation that they are in. And it's their union that's about to lay off some of the best teachers. Why? Because they haven't worked there as long as the overpaid teachers. Well, let's just say the higher paid teachers. Having this kind of cuts in staff will only make situations worse when it comes to kids learning. It needs to happen, but you can't say that laying off coaches and all these teachers and administrators, you can't say that that's going to help, right? So this came out of, it was kind of an opinion piece by Niraja Deshpande, who's a women's policy analyst for IW. And she writes for the Daily Wire, she says, we've seen the same headlines over and over. Generation Z, or Gen Z, isn't dating or driving or drinking or making friends, with record numbers of young people today living with their parents and refusing to build careers well into adulthood. These statistics paint a grim picture of my generation, she says. But beyond our specific cohort, they point to an overall culture of dependency that is antithetical to the free citizenry of our democracy and what it relies on. a culture that was built by the failure of our institutions and especially our schools. As veteran teacher Paula Edwards, not her real name, by the way, told IW Features in a recent documentary, quote, "If we don't have a literate society, we really don't have a free society," unquote. She recounted the abysmal classroom environment in the New Mexico public schools she has worked in, from deteriorating academic and behavioral standards to ideological indoctrination. Edwards reached her breaking point and transitioned from teaching to coaching after a second grade student who was not potty trained, allegedly began smearing feces on his peers when he was angry and wanted to skip his lessons. In this single anecdote alone, we can identify several failures of the state not to assess the child's home environment, of the school to allow a child who was not potty trained to be in a general class, and of the school not to remove him from the classroom, give him the environment he actually needs, and protect other children from being traumatized by his behaviors. It's not the child's responsibility to train himself in basic functions. It's the duty of adults who either failed him, or in the case of teachers like Edwards, were not allowed to give him the help he needed. This is perhaps an extreme, albeit not rare, case, yet such bad outcomes as this arise precisely because of an educational philosophy that has prevailed in schools for decades, even in less difficult situations than this student's. Generations of students have been coddled to their own detriment, being given passing grades they do not deserve, and free rein to act out and hurt themselves and others in the name of compassion. Of course, there is no compassion at all in enabling students' worse behaviors. The behavioral anarchy that has come to dominate so too many schools around the country and make teaching an impossible profession has its origins in Obama era policies that essentially considered any form of discipline as a potential form of discrimination. While those were revoked federally during the first Trump administration, many states still have unviable policies that make disciplining students impossible and that encourage this sort of conduct that has led to educators like Edwards fleeing the teaching profession. The positive behavioral interventions and support system, which was formally enacted by New Mexico in the last decade after being introduced by the federal government in the 1990s, forced teachers and administrators to ignore negative behavior and reward positive behavior through prizes and tokens, which amount to bribery, as Edwards puts it. These gamified incentives inevitably disappear in the adult world, and yet the responsibilities of adult life remain. So then what? Students who have never acquired the discipline to succeed in school are naturally going to struggle with adult life, rendered incompetent and unable to participate fully in society as adults. This reminds me of a video I saw just recently of a woman. She's completely serious. I mean, it's her own TikTok video or whatever, and she's saying, "Hey, I'm not a man or a woman because my dad was a man, my mom was a woman, so I'm both." Mm-hmm. Sometimes this type of dependency is not just passively but actively encouraged by the school system. In a particularly horrifying anecdote, Edwards told IW Features how the Bureau of Indian Education schools teach Native American children how to fill out welfare applications. Yeah, that's what they're teaching them. Instead of teaching them to read with evidence-based methods and enabling students to lift themselves out of poverty when they grow up, Edwards said that these schools teach students a different lesson. Quote, be dependent for the rest of your life, unquote. It doesn't have to be this way, and it shouldn't. We have the status quo we have because we chose to tolerate it. We spent billions of dollars on education as a country as it stands, and there is nothing stopping us from redirecting that money from failed progressive endeavors to student behavior reforms and evidence-based institutional and instructional methods that actually work. As Edwards advocated, she said, get your indoctrination out of the classroom and get us back to the basics. School is for getting our kids to read and write and do math, unquote. In fact, in Oregon, there is no standards to receiving a diploma. Did you know that? No standards, nothing. Everyone gets one, no matter what. A diploma. You get a diploma. You get a diploma. And you get a diploma. And you get a diploma. You know what I mean? This way, the state school system, their graduation rate looks really, really good, right? Because everybody gets a diploma. Never mind that kids can't read or do math. But things are starting to change. This is not a doom and gloom podcast, okay? Things are starting to change. This is an opinion piece by Carrie Ingraham, who is a senior fellow at Discovery Institute and the director of American Center for Transforming Education, and actually a senior fellow at the Independent Women's Forum. And she says, across the country, policymakers have long assumed that boosting K-12 funding is the surest path to better student outcomes. I mean, I'm going to interject here that whenever a school bond comes up, you know, the thing on the signs all across the yard signs everywhere is, you know, stand up for school children, right? In other words, give us more money and you're doing the right thing for kids. But Carrie says, yet the decades of rising spending have proven otherwise. The missing ingredient is not money, it's meaningful choice. Florida provides one of the clearest examples. In 2001, the state launched a modest tax credit scholarship program to help low-income students access alternative educational options. Roughly 15,000 students participated in the program's first year. Today, Florida's school choice ecosystem serves over 500,000 students across multiple programs, giving families options tailored to their children's needs. Critics long warned that policies empowering parents with educational options for their children harm public schools and their students, right? You can't have that. You can't interject any kind of competition into our school system. That will just ruin everything. Yeah, right. The data, however, shows a different story. The positive effects of school choice extend beyond participating schools and students. Florida public school students exposed to greater levels of school choice competition have experienced learning gains equivalent to as much as 120 additional days of instruction in reading, nearly 2/3 of a school year. These effects are especially strong for low-income students who, of course, often have little to no alternatives to their, residentially assigned district school, public school, regardless of whether it fails to educate children in the basics or to keep them physically safe. A substantial body of research across multiple states, including Florida, Ohio, and North Carolina, shows that as public schools face increasing competition, students who remain in traditional public schools achieve higher test scores and stronger outcomes. It is no coincidence that students do better when school choice exists. When families have options, schools must compete. Ooh, nasty word, compete. The market forces of competition is a powerful incentive that can drive innovation, sharpen priorities, and shift the focus from bureaucratic competence and compliance to providing improved academic instruction. It also encourages schools to be more responsive to parents and more intentional in how they use resources. For years, however, the default answer in education debates has been pretty simple, really. Spend more money. That's it. Spend more money. Calls to, quote, fully fund public schools are constant, yet rarely defined. I mean, what is fully funded, right? And even less often tied to accountability for results. What matters is not how much is spent, but whether those dollars actually translate into improved student learning. Despite steady increases in per student spending nationwide, academic outcomes have persistently been low for years. According to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the NAEP, often called the nation's report card. You've probably heard of these, right? The reading scores and math scores remained relatively flat and then declined sharply. I mean, really sharply following the pandemic and prolonged school closures. The most recent results reveal that 69% of fourth grade students and 70% of eighth grade students, so basically the same number, are not, I repeat, not proficient in reading. 70%. While 61% of fourth grade students and 72% of eighth grade students aren't proficient in math. With an additional $200 billion with a B dollars poured into K-12 public education during the pandemic, these figures underscore the greater funding does not equate to increased student learning. Simply put, more money has not produced better outcomes. Instead, what has made a measurable difference is competition. A recent analysis by Patrick Graff finds that Florida's school choice programs are more than 11 times as cost effective as improving public school students' achievement compared to the equivalent increase in K-12 spending. Achieving similar gains through funding alone would have required more than $1,400 in additional spending per student annually, totaling roughly $31.8 billion over 15 years. Nationwide, school choice spending accounts for an incredibly small share of the state funding. For example, in 2022, school choice programs accounted for just 0.3, that's 0.3, a third of 1% of total state spending. In Arizona, critics have fear-mongered that the state's school choice program with universal eligibility would bankrupt the state. The claim is, of course, far from factual, as the Arizona Empowerment Scholarship Account program funding in 2022 was only 0.9%, less than 1% of the state budget. And the state experienced a $2 billion surplus. The end result of school choice is enormous savings to the state. These are not isolated cases, but are becoming a constant pattern emerging across the country. The improved outcomes driven by school choice are becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. In 2025 study of Arkansas Education Freedom Accounts finds that school choice is delivering strong academic performance, high family satisfaction, and sustained participation signaling real benefits for students. In Washington, D.C., students who used a scholarship through the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship Program were 21% percentage points more likely to graduate from high school than their peers who did not receive one. Similarly, in Milwaukee, home to the country's longest running modern private school scholarship program, longitudinal research shows that students participating in a school choice program are more likely to graduate from high school and attend college than comparable public school students. A study by the Urban Institute on the Educational Choice Scholarship Program found that students in Ohio using private school scholarships were significantly more likely to attend and complete college, including higher rates of bachelor degree attainment. So basically finishing college. Together, these findings point to lasting benefits that extend beyond K-12. As the traditional system continues to fall short, the evidence points to a clear reality. Funding levels alone do not account for differences in student performance. What does make a difference in access to educational options? That's what does make a difference. School choice introduces the kind of competitive pressure that has long driven improvement in other sectors. I mean, it works everywhere else it's tried, right? And education is no exception to this. As more families recognize these benefits, demand, of course, grows further. If the goal is to raise student achievement, particularly for the most vulnerable, expanding access to educational options warrants adoption. It delivers significant advantages for students who pursue alternatives and for those who remain in traditional public schools. Education policy should be guided by what works. For decades, the prevailing assumption has been that increased spending will reliably produce better results. The data tells a different story. School choice, by contrast, has demonstrated consistent measurable effects, not only on academic performance, but also on long-term outcomes such as high school graduation and college enrollment and degree attainment. The question is no longer if school choice works. It's whether policymakers elected by the taxpayers, but beholden to the teachers' unions, are willing to act on the evidence. And I think that's a big key right there. We have policymakers, we have people who are writing these laws, passing these laws, signing these laws that basically hold our kids hostage. It doesn't matter what school you want to go to. It doesn't matter how bad that school is. It doesn't matter how bad those teachers are. It doesn't matter if they even have the programs that your kid needs. It doesn't matter. The one thing that matters is where you live. How close are you to this school? And you have one choice. It's a monopoly. You have one choice. No, of course, that's not a choice. You have one choice, and that is to send your kids to the school that they tell you you need to go to. If there's school choice, what happens? Well, suddenly there's competition. Suddenly the school might have to get its act together. Suddenly the school might have to look at who's teaching your children. Suddenly the school might have to look at the curriculum it's using. Suddenly it might have to see if kids are actually learning how to read and write and do math and do science and all of this. Suddenly, if they don't, then they're going to lose children and they're going to lose funding. But instead of all of this, instead of having choice for the parents to send their kids to whatever school they think is best for their children, these lawmakers are beholden to the teachers unions, and the teachers unions are saying, hey, even if there are cuts, even if we have to have cuts, then we're going to just cut those that haven't been around as long. It's not going to be based on whether or not they're good teachers. But these parents are finally, and this is what I really, really wanted to emphasize. Parents are finally becoming involved in their kids' education. Instead of just shipping them off to the closest school, they're actually getting involved, and they're saying, hey, this isn't right. We need to have a choice. And maybe that choice is taking them out of public school. Maybe that choice is a private school system, or maybe that choice is teaching them myself in a homeschooling situation. I just hope that it's not too late. And I would love to hear what you think about it. Is it too late? Have we not taught a generation, and is our society going to not be prepared for what needs to happen? We're not going to have the adults we need in positions they need to be in because our public school system has failed. They have been funded. They have failed. Is it too late? I'd love to hear from you on it. Of course, you can always do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com. Thank you very much for listening.
This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.